Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm Roy. We've got an awesome guest we're going to jump right into tonight. Myles Biggs has joined us and going to be talking to us a little bit. He is an author, a TEDx speaker, and a podcaster. He's just put out his first book, Unseen Work. And when I saw the title, I knew that we had to talk. So Myles, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's just jump right into it. Unseen work. Tell us a little bit about what does it mean exactly, and what kind of got you going down the path to write this?
Sure. So the book is called Unseen Work. The subtitle is Why the Best Path to Your Goals is Not Always a Straight Line. So what it means is, I've noticed in my time as a podcaster, and I'm sure you have as well, whenever I'm talking to somebody that's doing something really, really cool, say they've published a book or they're running a top tier business, you get them on the podcast for that thing that you can see.
Right.
But the greatest stories happen when they start telling you about the stuff you can't see, the unseen work. So we get really infatuated with the finish line of getting to something in the future that we want to be seen for. Right. But we learn the most, we grow the most, we can be the happiest while we're actually getting there. And so my podcast is called Relish The Journey. It's a very similar motif then to the unseen work. And I think they kind of go hand in hand, that it's really a challenge to folks to realize that, you need to relish the journey. Right. That path towards getting seen. There's a lot of really great things that happen that you can leverage to accelerate that pathway to be seen if you know what they are, they being that types of unseen work. If you know what the types of unseen work are, when you're aware of them, you can start putting them to work and speed up that trip you're on towards that quote unquote finish line, whatever it is for you.
I think that's such a great message. And I'm going to, kind of talk to the younger audience for a minute, that we get so focused on the goal, the end thing, we forget to enjoy the life that we have getting there. Or we're so busy trying to build a business, it's like, well, I'll wait till I want to wait till I hit this number of revenue before I take a vacation or this or that, and we can end up putting our life off. So anyway, I think it's awesome to think about all that other stuff that we do and how it enhances our life. Just another quick story. I talked to another guy not long ago, and same thing. He when he was younger, he took some time off, went on just a trip around Africa, and everybody told him it's going to kill your career. Don't do it. But he said when he came back, people were more interested in his 6 months that he took off than they were in his school or his past work histories. That we breeze over all that and then be like, so tell me about this trip, and how was it touring Africa? So anyway, very important. I think a lot of us missed the mark on that. So awesome. I'm glad you put this out.
Thanks. Yeah, and actually that example you gave plays really well into just a brief explanation of the types of unseen work. So in the book, I go over 3 different types: generational unseen work, active unseen work, and passive unseen work. I think what you just did is a good example of passive unseen work. This guy, say you're trying to get a job, and people think this trip to Africa in no way is related to that job, but things passively compound. Unrelated things, when you look back and play hindsight is 2020, you see how they actually help you towards reaching a goal. And so that's an example of, if you know what's happening in the moment, you can make better use of these seemingly unrelated things and use them to your advantage. So that's passive. Active unseen work is your typical goal setting. I want to go from point A to point B, and what's my pathway to get there? And then generational unseen work is the idea that everything that we do, that we're able to do, is really because of the people that came before us. Who I am and the opportunities I have are because of what my parents did, because of what their parents did. And so the book starts there, because I really believe that before you decide where you're going to go, you have to have a really good understanding of where you came from.
Right.
And then you get to decide, what do you keep? What do you discard from the generational stuff? Because sometimes it's not great. Sometimes there's stories that your family tells you that isn't true or doesn't align with where you want to go. So you've got to get rid of that stuff, keep the good stuff, and then you get to decide where to go next. So
I think that's an awesome point to make, because, you know, we talk about that, or I talk about that a lot in business planning, and I give away my age just a little bit and say, you know, when I was younger, we actually had a paper map that you unfolded and we had to read it before we went on the trip. And so in order, you know, maybe I know I want to drive to Chicago, but if I don't know where I'm starting at, how do you even pick that route out? So I think it's really important to do a little self-reflection, personal life, career, wherever we are, to think about that for just a minute. You know, really, where are we right now? What are our strengths, weaknesses, and just take some stock in us for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I don't think we tend to do that. We're usually so busy, you know, fighting the fires of the day that we don't really sit down and, you know, think logically and planning about our personal life like we should. And then, so the generational, that's the people that came before us. And, you know, I think that's another great point to make, is that we are shaped, you know, by all those people. I guess your parents, grandparents, we learned so much from them, but we do have the choice to pick the good stuff and the bad stuff and decide what we want to use out of that lesson.
Yeah, you don't have to do the exact same thing they did, right? Or you have to make those own choices. And I talk to so many people that are just trapped by that story they've been told, or now they're telling themselves, that kind of have to shake them awake and get them out of it to realize that, you know, it's your life, nobody else's. Right. You have to own it.
Yeah. Now, does one of these factor more into the equation than one of the others? Or are they all pretty equal, or is everybody just different?
Yeah, I think everybody's different. And I think every situation's different. It's a very dynamic concept where your unseen work today might be different than it is tomorrow and 5 years from now, right? And it's going to change, but it's just being aware of it and knowing when and where to acknowledge it and use it. So depending on who you are and what you're working towards, what you want to be seen for, that's what's going to dictate the answer to that question, you know? Okay. But they're all equally important. I think it's just like a tool, right? Any tool. You need a hammer, you need nails, you need a screwdriver. You know, it just depends what job you're doing, which tool you pick up to use.
Right. Yeah, and the unseen work too. I think we talked a little bit about this the other day, but we look at a lot of people as overnight successes, and we think, wow, that guy just came out of nowhere. We never think about all the unseen work that people put in order to be very successful. Typically, it's not easy, and a lot of people put in, you know, there's a lot of effort, whether it's sports or business or whatever. There's a lot of effort that goes in that people never really see or understand.
Totally.
Yeah. And I feel like in our personal life, excuse me, that, you know, that's, it's the same thing. We've got to put that work in on ourselves, you know, in order to move toward the goal that we want at this time. And the other thing too, it's okay to change. You know, we may start down that path, but as we do, situations change. Maybe we found something we like better, we want more. It's okay to redirect as we start down that path.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't, because they feel like, man, I'm gonna have wasted all this time now. If I was halfway through and now I jumped. But that's where I like the different types, right? So if you're actively pursuing something, you know, an example I give in the book is I used to take flight lessons. So I got about halfway through my pilot's license. I soloed an airplane, and then I stopped. My son was born. I was exhausted. It was not a good idea to get up in the air and fly a plane with no sleep. But then, you know, like 3 years go by, and, you know, I'd have to basically start all over again. And just at that point, I don't have the same need for a pilot's license as I did when I started. It would have just been for fun. And so I stopped. But so I was in the middle of active unseen work, right? People would have seen just the pilot's license, and they can make any determination they want to about how easy or hard that was to get. But I stopped. But now all that effort I put into getting my pilot's license is part of my passive unseen work for something else. All the skill sets I learned for reading the maps and the charts, for understanding the principles of flight and navigation and just the mental toughness that comes with takeoffs and landings. Like, I'm not flying a plane anymore, but all of that I use someplace else. And so that's what I try to get through to people in the book and in any conversation is like, there is no wasted effort. You just have to make the decision to not waste it. And that level of awareness is huge to making sure that you don't just throw it away, that you can bring it forward in everything else that you do.
Yeah, and all those experiences that we gather along the way in these trials and errors, you never know when it comes full circle and we're able to do that. And I'll tell you the other part about that is it's especially when you're in sales, but when you network, it's all of those things are great conversation starters to try to talk with other people about, is those similar experiences that we all have. So it's a great point. That's nothing that's wasted.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what made you want to write this book? I mean, was there an event or something that happened, or did the light bulb just go off one day?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a light bulb moment. So I was in a mastermind group. So if people don't know what a mastermind group is, this one that I was part of, it was like an online networking group on personal development. And I just said this, I really wish I could remember the topic of conversation, but I remember writing down a note to somebody who was saying something, and it was like my reflection. And I said it back to the group, and everybody like stopped and jaws hit the floor. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, that resonated with them. Right. And it was just this one line that I used in the TED Talk and the book. And it was, you have to do the unseen work so that when you are seen, you have something to show for it. So it started with just that line and then expanded to the talk and to the book. And so I just had that line written down for a couple months, and I kept thinking about it, and it was kind of following me around in my subconscious. I remember that reaction from people. And then in a separate conversation with somebody, they threw out randomly, I was approaching 100 episodes of my podcast at that time. And they said, hey, have you ever thought of your podcast as market research for a book? And I had not thought of that at all. As you could probably attest to, right? You're just kind of like focused on one episode at a time, and you're not thinking a book, right? One more thing for me to do. So, but once they said that didn't leave me alone either. That was just like punching me in the back of my head every day, just thinking about it. And so I sat down and started re-listening to my podcasts. So I started episode 1, and I had 100 at that time, and I started going forward. I didn't make it to 100, but I made it to like episode like 18, I think. And I realized that I was taking notes and just kind of journaling, like what I was reflecting on and listening to this person and just seeing if there was any theme there. And I started to notice what I said earlier about this person I was interviewing who had done this really cool thing. When I started to ask them how they got there, what advice they would give, like what shaped them as a person, that unseen work idea kept coming forward and coming forward and coming forward. And so I listened to more podcasts, had more ideas. And then eventually I think I ended up with 9 total examples in the book of guests from the podcast. And each of them fit into either generational, active, or passive unseen work. And so I tell the principles of unseen work through their stories and then pepper in my own stories. So started as that kernel of a one-liner I said that had a reaction, and then that offhanded comment from somebody that when I took the time to actually think about it, I realized I had something. And then once I realized I had something, I just wrote. I wrote at least half an hour every single day for about 4 months. Wow. And that's what gave me the manuscript. And then from there was a bunch of editing, and and here we are. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting concept, because I think you just wrote your own journey. It's kind of I guess your path, because you don't think about, you just look and think, this guy wrote a book, it's on a bookshelf, maybe he took some words and typed them into a keyboard or whatever, but you don't think about, the hours and hours and hours that people have, of the number one, the podcasting, just to get the episodes done, but then also going back, listen to them, taking the time to write the manuscript. That's a lot of unseen.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of ironic how I'm writing about this idea that it became very, very prevalent in my life, especially this year with 2020, right? Oh my gosh, it's the year of unseen work for everybody. We're all in quarantine and stuck in our homes, and who knows when it's going to end. So the timing was just serendipitous there. But my goal from the start was, I wanted to give the TED Talk first and then publish the book. So I didn't touch too much on that. But at the same time I started writing the manuscript, I was made aware there was a TEDx event in my area. They were accepting speaker nominations. And so I was like, okay, I had this idea for the manuscript. Let's see if it works. And I'll pitch it to the TED people. And if they like it, then I know I probably have something, because they get a lot of different speaker requests and they see more of the stuff than I do. So I'll see what they think, and I'll use it as kind of a test. If it hits there, then the book will work, was my thought. And so it did. I wrote my application. They asked me to do a 5-minute version of my speech to audition. From there, I got it, and I had to write a 15-minute version of my speech and then do that at the TED event. The TED event was supposed to be in April, and we all know what happened in March, right? So I had the book written and edited and ready to publish right after the TED Talk in April, and then COVID happened, and I just put the brakes on all of it. And so I went from writing this idea and making the book to then just completely living out the idea, because I had it all ready to go, but couldn't do anything with it yet. And so the whole, from April to October, when the event actually took place, 6 months of me just getting ready while no one's watching for the conversation I'm having right now. So to your point about I wrote my own journey, I absolutely did. I ended up writing about it and then living it, and now I published it, and I have even more to talk about with it.
So how has that changed you? After, I know writing the book and getting it out there in the TEDx talk, all that is, it's fabulous for exposure and getting you out there. But, I'm sure as you wrote this book, there was probably a lot of that self-reflection and taking stock of yourself. I mean, is there anything that you came to any other conclusions on, during that process?
For sure. The biggest thing for me is I realized that I was one of those people that was focused on like super far off in the future. Like one day I'd love to be seen for X, Y, Z.
Right.
But I never really got those things. Was a bucket list guy. I'd say stuff like, I'm going to write a book, and I'd write for like 4 hours one day and be so excited. And then it would just like die. And I never finished the book. I literally have 3 started books in my Google Docs before this one that I never finished until this one. So what I learned was, and I think is an important part of this whole process for me, was it's not about the macro result that you're looking for. It's those micro efforts. It's like I said, I literally wrote this book half hour a day, sometimes less. Sometimes it would be like 5 minutes at the gym on my phone. I would get an idea and I'd type it in a notepad on my phone and come back to it. Or I would do a voice dictation on my phone while I'm walking my dog, and I'm writing the book that way. But it was just very, very small pieces. But that small, consistent effort over and over and over again resulted in the book, resulted in the TED Talk. And so I think that's the biggest thing I learned about myself, is that I need to break things down into even smaller pieces. I thought I had small, actionable, measurable, achievable goals before, but I really didn't. They weren't granular enough. And I learned that when I break a really big thing down into super, super small pieces, then I'm much more successful at it.
Now, did you actually take pencil and paper and make an outline, or is this more just thoughts that you kept in your head, for breaking things down to have the smaller bits and pieces?
Yeah, so I didn't do pen and paper, but I did electronically. Did have an outline that I worked from, and then that helped. I got the whole thing out of my head, right? You put the whole thing down on an outline so you don't forget about it, but then you go back and just focus on that one piece. And then you do that one piece, and you do the one next piece, and then all of a sudden those pieces become a TED Talk or a book, or insert whatever else whoever's listening to this is working on, right?
Yeah. So along that journey, and once you created the outline, you kind of got started. Did and I'm like you in the beginning. I've got 3 or 4 book titles that I've gotten, and maybe got the outline, and just you just find you kind of run into the wall. I mean, what are some things that you did to kind of help you when you ran into the wall to push through or keep going?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a great question, because you definitely run into the wall, especially with writing. There are some days where I did not want to write at all. I felt like what I wrote was absolute garbage, and it was when I went back and read it.
Right.
But what I found was, if you want to break through that wall, the only thing you can do is to keep running into that wall, right? So it was, no matter how motivated I felt, I sat down and I wrote for half an hour. And sometimes it wasn't even about the book. I would just start writing like whatever random thoughts came into my brain, talk about the breakfast I just ate before I sat down at the computer, you know, like anything to shake the cobwebs off and to keep that exercise going. And some days that was it. That's all I had. But then other days I'd be 20 minutes into my garbage writing and I would just enter that flow, and all of a sudden good stuff would be coming out. But if I just had that expectation, I'd sit down and, you know, magic would flow from my fingertips from the first second I do the effort. It's just not the case. So I just feel like we all have this weird notion of like writing a book is going away to some writer's cabin and emerging 2 years later with a white beard and, you know, smelling like whiskey, and now you're a novelist, right?
Right.
That could work for some people, and maybe it did back in the day, but, you know, I have a full-time job. I didn't quit my job to write a book. I'm husband, father, like I had to fit it around my life. And so I'm on my lunch break, the kids taking a nap, you know, everybody's sleeping, and I'm just getting my thoughts down. And then over time, it's about 4 months of doing that every day, not just 5 days a week, 7 days a week, 4 months. I had a book.
Yeah. Interesting. So what are some other takeaways that, you know, that we can gain out of the book?
So besides the types of unseen work, which really set up for the foundation, I think a lot of things that hold us back from hitting whatever it is that we want to be seen for is our relationship with failure. And so I have some frameworks in the book around failure, because failure happens, whether we like it or not. So much of the greatest things in our life start with failure. So it's what we do with that failure, especially when nobody's watching, that's going to dictate how we react to a failure that happens when everybody's watching. So those two frameworks, I call them flip and flop.
I was gonna say, before you get into that, I'm gonna tell everybody, get a pen and paper, because you're gonna want to write this down. I mean, this is awesome. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. It means a lot to me that you liked it. It was fun for me to hear your reaction when we talked about this off air. I was like, cool. I love those moments, because it makes me feel good that, you know, it's not just me that thinks this is cool. What's in the book.
Yeah, and it resonates. I mean, it's not only a good acronym, but it really resonates with the point you're trying to make.
Yeah. So it's flip and flop, like we started to say. So the F in each of those is failure. Like I said, everything starts with failure. It's you get to decide, are you going to keep going or are you going to give up? So flip is fail, learn, improvise, pivot. And so when we can flip a failure, in my mind, that's when you turn a weakness into a strength, and you become the type of person that doesn't really truly fail. It's more of a setback at that point, because you just need to take a step back, recalibrate, and then go after it again and try again. So it's learning at its finest. You learn through failure and iterations. So fail, learn, improvise, pivot. The opposite of that is when you flop. So I love flop just because to me, I visualize face down on the floor, right? Flop, like it's over. So flop is fail, lie, obsess, pretend. And we all flop every day. I mean, you might not call it that, but this is when something's not going your way and you're blaming everybody else, but not instead of you. You're lying about the fact that you even care about this thing that didn't go right. You're obsessing over the fact that didn't go your way. And then you're pretending like it didn't happen and just moving on to probably make the same mistake again, to probably flop another time. Exactly. And so I talk a lot in the book about examples of that, and how with leveraging the different types of unseen work, you can have less flops and more flips and keep moving forward. And how your relationship with that while you're unseen will decide how quickly you get seen for whatever it is you want to be seen for, and then how you can sustain being in that spotlight. You know, I think common analogy, right? You think of the lottery winner that wins millions of dollars and goes bankrupt. It's not the money that made them bankrupt, right? They weren't ready for the money. They weren't prepared. They hadn't put in the work on themselves. They didn't have the frameworks, the systems around themselves for how to deal with large amounts of money. And the same is true for success. If you don't know how to deal with success, if you don't know how to deal with the pressure, if you can't flip things that go wrong, then you flop. So that's one of my favorite sections of the book, is all the examples from my life and other people's lives that I've shared in the story about the flip and the flop, and how you can use that in your approach towards whatever it is you want to be seen for.
Yeah. And I like that point that you make about the sustainability, that if it's just like building the foundation. We build the foundation with that unseen work. We're more apt to be able to sustain that success that we reach than, if we just throw something out there, it becomes a success. We really don't know how to follow that up. And sometimes, like you said, just the celebrity or being important for a day or two is enough to just tear you apart.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I wish I had a graph paper, because, there's a good meme goes around. It's like people think the trajectory for success is like that, just a straight line from the bottom left to the top right. And it's not. I mean, it's just jagged. Some days it dips further than others, and sometimes we go 2 or 3 days down and then we come back up. But I think, again, it's that perseverance. We can either choose to flop or we can choose to flip.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because that's why, I mean, if you're just listening and not watching right now, you can't see it, but that's why I put this arrow with the loop on the cover, and why I say that the best path isn't a straight line. It's like what you said, you got to go backwards and down and all around before you can go forward again. Right. And that's right. I think once you accept that truly and realize it's going to happen, you're not as frazzled when it does happen. Right. And then you sort of smile to yourself when you're in that take a step back moment, because you realize the only thing to do now is to loop and go forward. Right. And so it's a huge mindset shift. I think it helped me. You asked the takeaway. A big takeaway for me with this was how I process things in my own levels of stress and anxiety. Right. It's been huge for me in all the stuff between my ears, right, and in my head. So I'm excited for it to get in more people's hands and hopefully do the same for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite sayings. It came out off of the golf course, but it's the toughest 6 inches on a golf course are the one between your ears, and we have to conquer that before we can conquer everything. Whether it's fitness, health, career, business, whatever it is, we have to get over that. And I had a priest. He was such an awesome guy that told me one time that our minds are grinders and they grind all the time, but we get to choose what they grind. And so if you flip that positive, the negative, to a positive, instead of grinding the negative of what bad just happened this morning, and we can grind that all day, and the rest of our day will go that way, or we can turn it around and make a good day of it too. And another example is, there was a guy that I can't remember what it was all about, but basic message was that the obstacle is the way. We have to, we can't try to go around the obstacle. We have to go to it, because that's part of our journey, is actually finding a way to remove it. So, it helps. I think this is all about mindset. It helps us to view that problems aren't catastrophic. It's not going to be the end of it. We just have to be patient enough and find the solution through it, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. So, well, is there anything else that you'd like people to know about the book before we wind it up?
I mean, that was without giving away the whole book. Those are good teasers.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, so before I let you go, so what is a tool or a habit or something that you use either in your daily life, whether work or personal, that you just couldn't do without? And then the B part of that question is, has it changed from prior to writing, starting the research and writing the book, to now that you've finished it?
Sure. So for me, the resource, I use a specific app, and I should probably learn how to pronounce it, but it's either Scribd or Scribd. It's SCRIBD is the name of this app.
Okay.
And it's an audiobook app. It's similar to Audible, but instead of paying per book, you pay a flat monthly fees, $8.99 a month, and you get unlimited titles. So I am a huge audiobook guy. By listening to books, I actually read about a book a week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that was huge for me before COVID-19 and before writing a book. But it might sound weird to say you're writing a book, how are you going to be reading a book? But I found it helpful. When I was stuck in that wall moment we talked about, how do I say this? Listening, reading all these other people and how are they saying things, and just picking up on styles and word choices and how they'd structure their book. It was very helpful. Expose myself to all different ways of doing it, tell me figure out the way I wanted to do it. Yeah. So I was listening to it before the book, during the book, and now afterwards. So it hasn't changed, but I love it. Anytime I'm working out or walking my dog, instead of just silence or listening to the radio or even a podcast, I'm listening to books on business, on personal development, on whatever I decide I want to read that day. And it's been cool.
Okay, awesome. Now, so did that change? Were there any habits that changed? Like I said, things that you may have done a certain way prior to doing the research and, completing unseen work, not necessarily just the writing of the book, but all the lessons that you learned while you were putting it together.
Anything that changed like through that?
Yeah. Any of your daily habits. Any of your daily habits, things like that.
Yeah. So some of the stuff, I don't know if it's so much changed would be the word I'd use, but I think just got clearer. Like there are some things that I've stopped doing, and now things I'm religious about doing. Right. So I think it gave me some clarity on getting very specific with my time. And it's like, I'm doing this thing. What am I getting for this thing? I only have so many hours in the day. We all do. So I had to get very conscious about how I was spending them and focusing on what was going to get me towards my goal that I wanted to be seen for, getting the book out. Right. So watched a lot less TV as an example, right? Doing this at night instead of sleeping right now. Right. So I've learned how to kind of tweak my day to know I can live with 6 hours of sleep. And so I wake up at this time. So I have a day job from 8 to 5. So that gives me these hours in between, right? What am I going to do when and break those down into those small pieces like I did in the writing exercise. And that's how, it sounds arrogant when I say this, but a lot of people ask me, how do I do all these things? Because you start rattling it off and it's like, wow, Myles, you're great. Day job, TED Talk, book, podcast, right? And to me, the thing is, right? I didn't start with all those things. I didn't wake up one day and just do all those things. I got very good at the podcast and got good at that. Then I added the TED Talk. Then I added the book, right? So it's having those habits then helps you build that momentum and add more without adding the same amount of effort as you did for that first thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I think that clarity on, where we're going and what are the things that are going to get us closer to that faster. And for those that are just listening and aren't looking at us on YouTube, you have a sign over your right shoulder that says, remember why you started. And I think, to me, that says a lot of it, that, reason I do this, and I'm like you, I have a day job and a lot of other things, but I do this for the people that I meet, and being able to let listeners or viewers find these gems, like your book, Unseen Work. And so when I get tired or think about lining up that next guest, those are the things that I think about. Is like, it's fun, and once you get on here and get rolling, it kind of, everything else kind of goes away. You kind of find that groove. So it's very important. But again, taking stock of where we're at, where we want to go, making everything very pointed to get to that journey. It's very important. Get to that end goal is very important. But enjoy the journey.
That's right.
All right. Well, if you wouldn't mind, tell everybody how they can get Unseen Work, how they can reach out and contact you. Or
Sure. Yeah. So the people watching again, you get to see the pretty cover here. So it looks like this when you look for it online. So how do you get it is right now it's for sale on Amazon. I'm working on getting it other places, but we just launched last week. So it's just on Amazon right now. So if you go to Amazon and you type in unseen work, it'll pop up. Bonus points if you type in unseen work, Myles Biggs, it'll really pop up. Spell my name with a Y. It's MYLES BIGGS. So you can find the book there. It's available in paperback and ebook. Working on the audiobook. Get that out soon with all the podcast gear.
Right.
And other ways to find me, I'm in the process of putting up a new website at mylesbiggs.com. So it's MYLESBIGGS.com. So you can check that out. And then that's where I'll find email, social media channels, all that stuff will be on mylesbiggs.com. So that's the best place to send you.
Well, Myles, again, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. It's been awesome. There's so many takeaways from this. I'm just going to tell everybody, go get the book, read through it yourself. I mean, it's very helpful. So thank you. And until next time, if anything we can do to help you in between, please don't hesitate to reach out.
I appreciate that.
Right.
Thanks, Roy.
Okay, you bet. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Business of Business podcast. Again, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. We're on all the social media networks. You can go to www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast. There's a player on there. Please share with your friends. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then now YouTube. You can go there and watch the episode taped. Again, this is Roy. Until next time, take care.